What's groovy? I'm Danye.
And I'm Marcia, and this is the
Hey Sissy podcast.
Thank you all for joining us for another episode. We have a very lovely guest today, the lady who gave birth to the both of us, Wendi Hayman. Wendi is the author of 3 books, with her next book, her 3rd book, being released at the end of the month. It's called The Pastor's Secretary, What Really Happens Behind Closed Doors. We shall see. You can find Wendi Hayman at wendihayman.com, where you can pre-order her book, and also on Instagram at Wendi Hayman. And Facebook at Wendi Hayman. Shout out to our guests. All right, Diane, what are we talking about today?
All right, so for today's episode, we're going to talk about why everyone needs therapy. So I got some questions from my mom and from my sister, and we're going to let y'all know why everyone needs therapy. So why does everyone need therapy?
All right, you want to go first?
I don't say everyone needs therapy, but therapy is good. It's definitely good for emotional healing. It's good for mental health. It's good for traumatic experiences, anything that you've gone through, any type of trauma that you've gone through, especially if you've gone through relationship issues. Is definitely good for that. Things that may have happened to you in your childhood that you may not know how to process, or you get through them emotionally by yourself, it's good to also go through therapy to handle those things.
That sounds like everyone to me.
Yeah. No, it does.
Legit. Everybody is like everybody, because everybody has some kind of trauma they need to work through, some bad relationship they've been in, some childhood issues. Like everyone is. I think it's just inevitable, because like we're people, and people are flawed, and you're bound to like cause some damage to your children, parents, and then people that are bound to cause damage to each other in relationships. Because like if you're a damaged person and you get in a relationship and you don't know how to process your emotions, you're gonna cause damage to other people.
True.
So essentially, everyone needs therapy.
As the saying goes, hurt people hurt people.
Exactly. There we go.
Everyone needs therapy.
Have you had therapy?
No, but I think I'm going to go.
Somebody keeps telling you need therapy, right?
Me.
Me? Oh,
So
we both have this calendar. Okay.
No, everyone needs therapy, because even if it's not a relationship thing or a childhood thing, as you get older, just throughout life, you're going to experience stuff that are going to require. And especially if you feel like you have no one to talk to, just being able to get out those emotions and those thoughts in your head is important too, so you don't overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, because one of the reasons I went to therapy was just so I could have like an unbiased person to talk to. Because family and friends, they are sort of biased, like in that they genuinely want to help you, or think they're helping you, and they want to only push you to do things that are safe and well-meaning. They don't want you to step too far out of your comfort zone, or do something that they think is risky behavior. And then also sometimes people always talk to you from their perspective on what they think you should do. It's not really objective as to what's best for you as a person.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. All right, so the next question is, if a person can't afford therapy, what are healthy, affordable, or free alternatives?
So I follow a couple of podcasts that promote therapy, and then they always talk about blackgirltherapy.com. It's one website where you can find therapists in your area, specifically Black women therapists, and then they also have therapists who do low cost, or who also take like Medicaid and Medicare. And then there's also some therapy apps that you can use where you can have a session with someone for just like $20.
And we'll put all of these suggestions in our description box, so you guys can definitely check out those.
I don't know any therapy alternatives, but if you can't afford therapy, then counseling is also good. If you go to a church, most churches, actually there are churches now that are getting more into mental health, so where they do have counselors that are on staff who do help with giving therapy. And if there's you in a church that doesn't have therapy, then just talking to the pastor or talking to a member on the pastoral staff actually helps as well.
Yeah.
I think something that's healthy and free. I guess finding some form of an outlet. I know in Atlanta they have a thing where you can go and like hit stuff, like break glass, hit a car, hit a punching bag. I think if you can find one of those in your cities or nearby area, that's a great way. It's not free, but I think it's a good way to, you know, release some emotion. If you can't express it in words, people listen to music, they write, dance, maybe do pottery, knit, crochet, paint, just something fun, you know, that can help you release. I think that.
But that's only releasing the emotion part of it. But you have to talk to somebody to release the mental part of it. Because when you don't talk to somebody, it causes you much mental anguish. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book. It's called suffering in silence. And people suffer in silence from things that they go through, things that they've done, things that have been done to them. So in order to get out of your head, get it out of your head, because as long as it stays in your head, it's going to torment you.
Right.
You have to talk to somebody. And I didn't get free from things that I did or that was done to me until I talked to somebody. I talked to several people. I confided in one person, then I went to a psychologist, and I had a pastor that I was counseling with.
Yeah. So all the things you mentioned, they are coping mechanisms to help you deal with things in the moment, but they're not substitutes for therapy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense.
Coping mechanisms, that's a good word.
You're welcome.
All right. So how do we take care of our mentality? As far as, you know, dealing with the thoughts in our head, you know, remaining motivated, pushing through, I guess a perseverance kind of aspect. How do we take care of that mentality?
Well, you know me, I'm a minister, so I'm going to go to the Bible first. And it says, casting down every thought and vain imagination that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought into captivity into the obedience of Christ.
Amen.
And then, well, we have Philippians 3:8, which is your favorite scripture.
It's 4 and 8.
4 and 8, sorry. Which is your favorite scripture that says,
think on what's some things are just, what's some things are pure, honest, lovely, good, and then
of a good report,
Yeah.
if there be any virtue, any praiseworthy in these things, think on those. So, but in saying that, you have to change your thoughts. You have to think on not what you've gone through, not what has happened to you, not on the negativity of your past. You got to think positive thoughts. You have to think thoughts that are going to be uplifting. You have to, just as Romans 12:2 tells us, that we have to transform our mind. Our thinking we have to put forth a concerted effort to transform our mind. And one way we do that is thinking differently than the way we were already thinking. The longer you meditate on stuff that has happened to you, especially traumatic things, negative things, that's where bitterness and anger and hatred and all those things build up in you. You have to change your mind. You have to change your thoughts. You have to think about other things. What's wrong?
You preaching.
Okay, wait, I got a question for you. Okay,
But for those who don't know the Bible.
So, you say you have to change your thought process and how you think. How do you do that? I understand that you do that, but how?
So I have an answer for that.
Okay.
So one thing is to practice gratitude. So with let me say it again. One way is to practice gratitude. So the Bible tells that give thanksgiving in all things. And then I also read a book called The Gratitude Diaries by Janice Kaplan, I believe her name is. And essentially she spent a year practicing gratitude for everything that may have caused her some like frustrations, like her husband, her kids, her job. Instead of always looking at the negative side, like, oh my God, I hate traffic. Practice gratitude. I mean, yeah, traffic sucks, but it's like, I'm alive. Or, you know, this traffic is all right. You know what? I've been meaning to listen to this podcast. I can take that time to do this now.
Thank you, God, I'm in a car.
Thank you, God, I'm alive. Thank you, God, the sun is shining. It's practicing gratitude will change your mind. Even in the tough situations, you get like oftentimes when someone dies, people like stop believing in God, because they're like, how could God take that person away from me? But a way to change your perspective is to say, thank God I had that person in my life. Thank God I got to spend time with that person, learn the things I learned from them. I am grateful for them and the memory of them and the love that they placed into my life.
Right. I also think one way that you can kind of change your thought process is kind of trick your mind, honestly. One definitely is positive affirmations, like sticky notes on your mirror. Take sticky notes with you, like you were saying, listen to podcasts in your car. Definitely how we kind of mentioned in our previous podcast, what you look on social media, find things that inspire you, find examples on YouTube of how people dealt with similar situations that you went through as well. So definitely finding ways to trick your mind into changing what you think about. The more you read and look at something or meditate on something, the more you'll start coming to your mind, you know. So
yeah, the more you think about it, you get into what we call a pity party. And one thing you have to understand is you are not the only person who have gone through what you've been through.
Right.
And there are so many people in the world that have gone through what you have been through, and people have come out positively, and they have, what we say in church, they have overcame that. And so what you have to do is you have to find those type of people, connect with those type of people. There's support groups out there for everything. You could always get in support group. And we have to get out of this mindset of, I don't want to tell people my business, or I don't want people to know my business. I don't want people to know what I've gone through. No, you got to get out of there. It's time to mature and grow up. Stop trying to keep stuff to yourself, because if you kept it to yourself, if you can handle it all on your own, you wouldn't be going crazy in your mind as you really are.
Yeah, it's like, I understand sometimes you don't want to talk to family because you like family gossip, family's messy. You ain't got to talk to family. Find someone else. Find a friend. Find an anonymous support group. There's strangers who are better than family and will help you through some situations.
And don't take to social media for your first means of release. Don't put all your business out on social media. And if you feel like you're not getting the response that you think you should have, that's another negative thing that you're putting in your mind. Oh, I didn't get that response or that attention I was looking for, so no one cares about me. Don't rob people of the opportunity to, you told me this, don't rob people of the opportunity or their decision to help you or take care of you without, giving them the chance. So don't assume that people don't care or don't love you or won't help you. Try to do it first before you make that assumption. So don't rob people of that opportunity. So the next question is, why isn't mental health talked about heavily in the Black community, and how can that change?
From my perspective, in my generation growing up, when people had mental health issues, the stigmatism was, they're crazy. Such and such is crazy. Oh, do you know such and such get a crazy check? And so there was a stigmatism in the Black community about mental health issues. And so therefore that passed down from generation to generation. And so nobody wants to deal with mental health issues because they don't want to be considered crazy. When it's not being crazy, it's actually a mental health issue. So it was about Black communities and society defining people as crazy because they actually had something going on in their mental health, with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, manic depression. I used to work in a homeless shelter that dealt with mental health issues, people in the homeless community who had mental health issues. So I saw all types of people, and a lot of them were Black, and they had to come through, they had to see a counselor all the time, they had to see a doctor all the time. And so a lot of times people do it for the check. A lot of times people won't do it because they don't want to be labeled as crazy. Back then, that's how they labeled you, as crazy.
Yeah, and some people, I even have one of my friends who said this to me recently. I was like, you need to go to therapy, you have some things you need to work through. And she was like, I don't need therapy, I got Jesus. And that's what Black people believe. It's like, I don't need therapy, I have Jesus. Yes, you do have the Lord. However, God made doctors, therapists, surgeons, counselors, pastors. God made all these people. These people wouldn't exist if they did not have a purpose in God's kingdom. So yes, go to therapy. You need Jesus and therapy, because therapists are people here and now who can help you work through the things that God didn't put in your life. God didn't put trauma in your life. So you need people to help you work through that trauma so you can fulfill God's purpose for your life.
And there are a lot of Christian therapists out there. Like I said, there are churches who now have therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists on staff. They have hired them to help their church community with their mental health.
For like our generation of millennials, I think we don't really talk about mental health because we don't want to be deemed as weak. I think if we like express ourselves, or like they say, if men cry, they're weak. If we express ourselves, if we show our emotions, that means we can't handle things. And people, we're kind of under this thing where, you know, if people treat me like this, I'm gonna become cold-hearted, and that will make me like I'm good being cold-hearted. So I think that's why we don't deal with mental health, because of, like you said, your generation see it as crazy, our generation see it as weak. You know, if people in your life, you know, make it seem like you expressing yourself and telling you how you feel and you talking about your emotions is shown as weak, you need to get rid of them people, because I mean, or
you're good for saying that.
I don't know, this is the thing with Diane. She's like, cut them off. Cut them all off.
I mean, because the less toxic stuff you have in your life, the more you can move forward. Yes. People who are toxic and negative can hold you back and want you to stay with them in their stagnant, complacent, negative mindsets. Why would you want to, you know, stay around those people?
Yeah, because there's a, this word is going to be used, the word, there's a toxicity in our community and in this American culture as a whole. The idea that showing emotions is weak. If we weren't supposed to show emotions, we wouldn't have them. And it's kind of foolish to say, oh, because you're crying, you're weak. If I'm hurt physically, I might cry. If I'm hurt emotionally, I might cry. If it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't happen. There's a purpose for the crying. Crying literally is a physical release of emotions. When you don't cry, you ball all that stuff up. That's how people have breakdowns. That's how people have shooting rampages on the highways, because they're holding in years of emotions because someone on the outside of them is calling them weak. Why do you care if they call you weak?
And it's interesting because men don't like to cry, and I watch young boys be raised up by their fathers, not allowing them to cry, telling them to man up, don't cry. When, as I read and study the book of Psalms, David always saying, I cry out to the Lord, I cry out to the Lord, I cry. David was always crying. They say he rent his clothes and he cried. He cried a lot.
And he was a king.
And he was a king.
I think it's important, you know, to mentally just release, because you get that peace. That sense of peace that you will feel when you release those emotions is so much more better than what the opinions and ideas of other people, what society has placed on the idea of expressing your emotions or your feelings. So, yeah. Okay, so the next question is, how can the mental health discussions change overall?
I think by people talking more about them going to therapy. Like, I think it's funny. I tell everybody I go to therapy. I'm like, I go to therapy, you should go to therapy. You should go to therapy.
Okay, Oprah.
And I think because, like she said, with the stigma in the community, that if you went to therapy or you even showed the slightest sign of being crazy, so people didn't talk about it. And because people are not talking about their issues, there's a lot of things that are hidden in the community. As we know, like, molestation happens, families don't talk about it. And I think just like with therapy, if you don't talk about it, nothing will get better.
Right.
So if we start talking about our experiences with it and letting people know not every therapist is trying to bash your parents, not every therapist is trying to put you in a mental hospital, then people will start to feel like it's a normal thing and that it's okay for them to do it.
I think TV has kind of, you know, affected that as well. we see a lot of stuff on TV and people going to therapy or being put in straitjackets and crazy houses and stuff like that.
True.
So that can affect our mindset on that kind of stuff. You know, I think that TV portrayal of kind of therapy and things that go on, maybe movies as well, kind of. Even Acrimony is an example. She was going to therapy. She still kind of went off the wall, unfortunately. I don't know if I should use that as an example then.
No, I have a good example of someone who went to therapy. I don't know if everyone knows Jennifer Lewis. She's currently on Blackish. She plays Anthony Anderson's mom. She wrote a book, The Mother of Black Hollywood. She talks about how she was a manic depressant and how it wasn't until she started going to therapy and how she got the right dose of medicine that she started to feel like she got control of her life. Because as a manic depressant, she would have super highs where she'd be high energy, all over the place, feeling on top of the world. But then she was also like a sex addict because of that. She had to like release all that energy.
Right.
And then she would go days in depression, not leaving her house. And so she didn't know what the issues was. She just thought that's how she was. But she actually had a condition. She was manic depressant. She needed a mixture of medicine and therapy to help her like get control of her life. And she's still in the business now. And it's like, had she not done that, she may not still be acting.
And notice the key thing we're talking about is finding something to relate to. That is like the key thing we're talking about. Books, YouTube videos, people that you can relate to in similar situations to be able to know how to deal with that stuff.
Yes.
And everybody, you have to put this disclaimer. Just because you go to therapy does not mean that you're going to get on medication.
No.
I was seeing a psychologist to work through emotions through a traumatic experience period that I was in my life. And I made the decision that I wanted to go and see the psychologist because I wanted to release the emotions from it. I wanted to be free emotionally. I didn't want to carry that emotional baggage around. And that's what the psychologist helped me with. And I didn't need medication. So everything is not deemed for medication, only if you have a clinical diagnosed issue. But if there's some emotional things, some traumatic experiences, especially from a relationship, you definitely, that's a good thing you really want to go through is have therapy or see a psychologist. There's a difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is for your manic depressive, your those are your psychiatric issues, schizophrenia, bipolar. But a psychologist helps you work through those mental and emotional issues that you go through.
And one thing real quick, if you are that person in your friend group who's like, I guess, the counselor, the advice giver of your friend group, that's you most importantly should go to therapy too.
Yes.
You should start with yourself, because if you're taking all your friends' emotions and their situations on, you are carrying too much weight on yourself. And so then you're going to start to go down, and then when you're not helping them, they're going to blame you. So it can be a bad cycle. So I think if you are that person in your friend group, you yourself should definitely go to therapy, how to handle your friends or their situations, suggest to them that they go as well, and then deal with your stuff internally as well. Take care of yourselves first, and then you'll be able to help other people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right, so next question. I think we kind of been talking about this a little bit, but if you have another, suggestion, what are ways to release emotions and overwhelming thoughts?
Yeah. So
I eat.
No.
I eat, and she gets on me all the time because when I eat, I post it on Instagram, having a bad day, so I'm eating. I know it's not good. I am an emotional eater, and there's several reasons why I don't think I want to say I'm on this podcast, but I have to eat to release my emotions.
Don't go to social media.
No, that's not what I said.
You say I'm having a bad day. Talk to somebody first, and then maybe you'll change your eating.
That's true.
I'm serious.
Maybe you emotionally eat because you feel like you have no one to talk to.
So talk to somebody first. Hey, I'm feeling like this. Maybe they can help you, and then so you won't have to go out and eat.
And maybe you'll get a cookie instead of those brownie a la moles you be getting.
Or I'll be at a restaurant for those. That's a self-date night.
So for healthier ways to deal with emotions, some people work out, but don't, work yourself out to death. But working out is a good way to deal with it. Going for a walk or a bike ride, going outside simply is a way to cope. And then of course journaling. A lot of suggestions I've seen over the years is to write out all your emotions. Write it out. Even if you're mad at someone, write them the angriest, nastiest letter ever, and then rip it up or burn it. Don't send it to them. Please don't send it. You don't want to ruin relationships because you're angry in the moment. But yeah, so yes, those are just a couple of ways you can handle it.
And another thing is talk to the person without talking to the person. Meaning, you take a chair, empty chair, sit it, you picture them sitting there, you say this is such and such, and you talk to them about how you feeling. Or if you driving, you put them in a passenger seat and have a conversation with them. That's one way of coping, getting it out. If you can't go to anybody right away, like we sometimes, that's one way of getting out those emotions. And then of course, talk to the Lord. He's
Amen.
Always listening.
Amen.
I talk to him after my bowl of ice cream, but I do.
We ought to reverse that order. Okay. And we could go back to the destructive elements that you talked about earlier. Beating up a pillow, inanimate objects. Don't beat up physical things. Don't kick a puppy. Beat up a pillow, or buy one of those things where you can throw axes at something. Go to the gun range. Go to one of those destructive centers. Do something like that, or even use creative outlets. Paint, draw, make music, dance. Get the energy and those emotions out of you.
Screaming is actually a good one too. Scream
into a pillow. You don't want to alert the neighbors if you live in an apartment.
No, I scream.
Go to a park by yourself and find like an open area and just scream.
No, you don't want to do it outside. Scream in your house.
Because people call the cops. There's a lady screaming in the park.
No, you just let out one screech.
I've actually went to the park and screamed before. Like if I'm there by myself.
No, go to your car and scream.
Oh yeah, that's
yes.
Okay.
I've done that in my car.
Okay. So scream. Let it out. Okay, so the next question is, how can someone with depression or suicidal thoughts or anxiety deal with those things? Woo! I know that's okay.
Heavy.
I think one thing that's been happening is we're kind of normalizing depression. A lot of people are saying they have depression. I'm depressed. We have depression. I'm depressed. Now, I can't say those people are lying, but is everyone really depressed? I know we all, there's nobody who has not experienced moments of deep sadness.
Yes.
But I think depression is on a whole nother level.
It is. Because depression isn't momentary.
Right.
It's an ongoing thing. You can be extremely sad. Mm-hmm. You can have a period of sadness, but depression is kind of a long reoccurring thing. And so with depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts, those are delicate situations. So if you are dealing with any of those, let me say it again. So depression, society, and anxiety, those are delicate things. And if you're dealing with any of those, that's when you truly need to seek help from a counselor, a therapist, or a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. Because talking to your friends may not relieve that. Yeah, that's. I have no experience with those things.
Oh, right.
I do have a friend who has anxiety issues because she got in a really terrible traumatic car accident, so she has really bad anxiety now, and so she's struggling to deal with that, and she's trying to get to therapy, but with her hectic life schedule, she can't make it. But I can't help her. Like, I could give like cute little advice or whatever. Oh, try to take deep breaths, but like she needs actual professional help.
Right.
I have had suicidal thoughts numerous times. I have had suicidal attempts
Mm-hmm.
several times. Thank God I didn't.
I know, right?
Amen.
Cause
Happy to see you here.
Right.
And actually, December 31st, 2016, I was in the midst of attempting suicide, but this lovely child right here happened to be in her room praying, and I believe her prayers reached heaven so heavily, which blocked that. Then there was also, I was going through an emotional period because of the situation that I was in. One day I was out walking, and while I was walking around on alongside a riverbank, and I said, I might as well just jump in there. So don't go walking by water when you have an emotional issues. But the way I came out of it was I snapped out of it. She snapped me out of it. She was like, that's not fair. Like, you want to take your life? How is that fair to me? And I had to realize that I'm not just in this by myself. I have people who are depending on me, who are looking at me. There is purpose for your life. When you realize and recognize that your life has true meaning and purpose, regardless of what happens in your life. Stuff gonna always happen in your life. Always. As long as you're alive on this earth, stuff is always gonna happen. You're never gonna have a stress-free, affliction-free, trouble-free, challenge-free life. Those people who you see who are multi-millionaires and billionaires have killed themselves because of stuff happening in their life. So it's not gonna not happen. You just have to process those emotions differently. Like you said, talk to somebody. I didn't talk to anybody, but I began to tell people, I had begun to talk about it. Hey, I've attempted suicide before. I've had to, when I was talking to my psychologist, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Yes, absolutely. I've attempted it twice. So we talked and we worked through that so that I won't get back to that place.
That's why going to therapy is important. Another thing is, I myself, I wouldn't know really how to deal with it, but it's definitely important to just talk. I mean, and really admit to yourself, like, I'm feeling like this. I'm going through something mentally. I'm having these thoughts. Don't assume that nobody cares. Yeah. Don't assume that nobody's going to be there for you, because you'll never know unless you reach out. And even if you feel like you reached out to everyone, keep reaching out, because somebody's going to reach back for you. So don't give up trying to, find help, because your immediate help is not available, because there's always a secondary help that will be there for you. Definitely God, like we said, counselors, there's support groups, suicidal hotlines. I don't think people use those resources enough. So definitely use those resources that are available to you to get there.
Yeah, and know this, the situation is not that bad. People commit suicide because of something that's happening in the moment.
Yes. And
like a friend of mine, she used to say, I'm not going to commit suicide because I'm too nosy. I want to know the future. I want to know what's on the other side of this.
Right.
So you have to know that it's just a moment. And that moment may last 6 months, but just like a storm don't last always, that moment is not going to last always in your life.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. You gotta seek help and talk to people. So again, there's all kinds of resources. If you have health insurance, most of the time your medical insurance covers therapy. I know mine does. I have Blue Cross Blue Shield. It covers my therapy sessions. Some therapists take you without insurance. They will have a reduced cost. If you don't have insurance, there's blackgirltherapy.com. There's apps where you can also seek a therapist. And there's the suicidal hotline, and then there's just podcasts you can listen to, and then You can always go to a church or a community center and talk to someone. There are the resources. So don't sit in your depression. Don't let those suicidal thoughts linger. If you need to, find a scripture that you can recite to yourself. Because I know sometimes when I'm driving, I get a little anxiety, and I have a scripture that I repeat to myself. I don't know what verse it is, but it's the Lord is my light and my salvation. I shall fear no one. The Lord will protect me from all dangers. I shall never be afraid. So that helps, like, instantly. I repeat it to myself when I get any small amount of anxiety. And that helps. So if you can find something as simple as a quote or a scripture to help ease your mind in the moment, just try to do something.
And I think what my mom said earlier about talking to that person or that chair, go to yourself and talk to yourself in your mirror, like, hey, you're thinking this, you're feeling this. Why? If you can't get like that immediate help right then and there, you know, go back to that mirror with them positive affirmations to reaffirm yourself. Go talk to yourself like, okay, what's going on? Why you feeling this way? You're feeling like this. Write it down. If you listen to music, don't listen to sad, depressing music that helps deepen those sad feelings. Listen to music, cause I'm happy. What kind of song go?
That's good enough.
No. Like I said earlier, you literally have to trick your mind. So in that moment, don't immediately go to tactics that make you feel sadder, maybe eating depressed, or, you know, listening to sad, depressing music, or isolating yourself. Go to a place with a lot of people. Take yourself out, like my mom said, go on a date night with yourself, have a friend go out. Even if you feel like your laughter and your joy is fake for that moment, it's good to get out of your head for that moment until you have the opportunity to get to that help. But just don't give up and be like, oh, this is it. You know what I'm saying? Be nosy for your future. That was good. I like that.
It's funny you talking about the music, because I remember years ago, I think you was about 3 years old, I was dating, and the guy, he was supposed to come over, he didn't, or he broke up, I don't know, something happened, and I immediately put on the song I'm Going Down by Mary J. Blige, and I just played that song. I laid on my couch with some wine coolers and drinking wine coolers, playing that song over and over and over, and I literally put myself in a sunken place.
Yes.
And you don't want to put yourself in a sunken place. If you're at home and something happens and you get sad or emotional, leave the house. Go, like you said, go for a walk, go for a swim. You know, go get a icy ice cream.
Go do something that makes you happy.
Something. Yes. And one quick thing, I've learned that anxiety is just things that we create in our head before they even happen.
Wow.
You know, if we know we're about to go into a big crowd, we start freaking out thinking that something's going to happen in that big crowd. Like if we're about to take a test, we're immediately be like, oh, I'm going to fail. You know what I'm saying? We're creating that anxiety in our head, that the imagination of that situation before it even happened. So this is all about thought process and changing your mindset. So before you start creating scenarios of things in your head, which it won't likely even happen, try to, you know, block those things with something else. So yeah.
And one last tip I want to give is to, if you're going through a really tough situation and you don't see the way out, try to write a letter to yourself in the future. Write to yourself as if you've overcome this situation and now you're doing something that you enjoy or you love. Because a lot of people do this for how they envision their life based on like 5 years from now when their business is thriving or something like that. Write that for yourself. Like, okay, I'm going through this depression right now, but in 6 months' time, date it for 6 months' time and say in 6 months' time, this is how I'm feeling. And write it in the present. Like, today is a beautiful day. I'm beyond happy. I did this. My day went so well. Like, project those emotions, and it will make you feel better in the moment. It will also give you something to look forward to.
Right.
And also find scriptures that can help you, that you can meditate on, positive scriptures that will uplift you.
Yes.
Trick your mind. It's all about tricking your mind, honestly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so we've repeated quite a few things in this episode. Like, you've gotten a plethora of tips, that things we've read, things we've done ourselves, and things we know of people that have done. Get help. Talk to somebody.
Yes.
Go to therapy.
It's not that bad. It's not as bad as you think. It really isn't as bad as people make it out to be. It actually is really therapeutic.
Yes. I think that's the point.
And refreshing, because when I would leave my appointments, I would feel better.
And the thing is, the important disclaimer, don't assume that the first therapist you pick, you have to stick with that person. Find a therapist that meshes with you. It's just like finding a regular doctor. Like, don't just go to one doctor and be like, oh, well, they're doctors, I'm just gonna trust them. You don't have to. Shop around. Just like you shop online and you will look at 45 websites before you buy something, do the same thing with therapists. Find the right therapist for you.
I also think a spa is good.
A spa?
Spa, a
Massage.
Oh,
massage,
oh.
a facial.
Yes.
You know, I think
Pedicure.
I think another thing is don't indulge, like don't splurge. But I think a nice day of treating yourself, getting your nails done, men getting your hair cut, getting groomed, going out playing basketball or something, football. Women getting your nails done, massage. Even for men, massages. You know.
Nails
Yeah, get your nails done too. You know,
pedicure.
Right. Taking yourselves out, like I said, I think a spa is pretty good.
It is gonna be an emotional roller coaster as you go through it. Because I know for about a couple of months after I started therapy, I felt like I was always on the verge of tears. Like my emotions were kind of like tilted in the opposite direction. I went from feeling content with life to feeling like every little thing was about to have me bursting out into tears. And it was just because as I was going through, I was working through some emotions I never worked through before. And now I'm okay and I'm better with it and I can go to therapy without crying. But it took at least a couple of sessions for me to get through that before I got to where I am now, where I can go to therapy and be happy and talk to my therapist and not feel like I'm crumbling emotionally. But it's a process. You got to work your way through it.
And also, like, you know, my sister was saying, it's not going to happen overnight and it's going to take some time. But don't be afraid to release your emotions and express yourself. And some situations and things may be hard to talk about and get through. If you feel like at that moment, like, hey, I can't talk about this right now, take that time, like don't talk about it, maybe change the subject for then, but don't like completely avoid it, because that's something that you will need to talk about eventually. So don't be afraid and scared of your emotions when you go to therapy, even for myself.
And also, now for me, when I went to therapy, I didn't have an emotional roller coaster. I just needed to heal mentally from some things. But if you're married to someone who goes to therapy, be on guard. There is gonna be some highs and lows, because there was a point when my husband was going to therapy, and apparently the therapist was dealing with some things from way back, we're dealing with some deep, hard issues, and I could always tell when talking to him when he had been to his therapy appointment, because he was like, I'm gonna say he was mean. He was mean, he was hard, he was harsh, he was like real on an emotional high, not emotional as in terms of crying, but he was like out of whack, and I did not like to be around him or deal with him, and I didn't want to talk to him after his therapist appointment. I wanted to stay away because he needed time to process. They need time to process and deal with those emotions that they hadn't dealt with before.
Right.
Yeah, because you're gonna find out some things about yourself in therapy that you may have never considered. Your therapist will say something and you'll be like, no, I don't accept that. But then it's like, when you think about it, you're like, dang, maybe that's right. And that's okay. You just have to work through it. Literally work through it. Anything worth doing is gonna take time. And think about it. If you're older, if you're like 50 plus, you got 50 years of stuff you gotta work through. I'm 31 and I'm like, ooh, 31 seems a little tough, but it's like, okay, I'm still young. I don't have kids. I don't have the trauma of having to be a parent. But imagine that you have the trauma of being a parent, losing a parent, going through breakups and divorces. That's a lot of junk in your life you gotta wade through to get to the other side of being healed.
And if you're going to do marriage therapy, don't be afraid to talk about your spouse to the therapist. That is the opportune time. A lot of times you hold that stuff in. Talk about your spouse to the therapist, because that therapy can bounce that back off of your spouse. It actually is helpful.
Yeah, that's when it's probably the safest space for you to do it, because you have the therapist there as your mediator, and the therapist will validate your feelings and allow your spouse to get their feelings out too. If they're a good therapist, if you find your therapist is leaning one way or the other, find a different marriage therapist.
Also, you have to be patient with that person, and you have to understand that they're going through something as well. So if they are a little mean or bitter to you, I guess relationship wise, you have to be like, okay, we're going through therapy. Like you say, you're on an emotional high right now. I'm gonna take a step back from you. I'm gonna let you have your time of peace. I'm gonna have my time of peace. Another thing is those sessions are confidential. So don't be putting your business out there. Don't tell other people what you're going through, because those people can draw you away from that. You know what I'm saying? Those people can sway you out of going to that therapy, or be like, oh, they doing this and that. You don't need that. You don't need them telling you. Don't tell people your business. It's none of their business what you and your therapist talk about, what you and your therapist, what you're doing. Keep that to yourself. That's for you to deal with.
And once you get through, talk about it, so you can encourage somebody else to go through.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid of your emotions. Emotions are scary because sometimes you feel like you can't control it. It's like,
a lot of times you can't. Controlling your emotions is a practice. It literally becomes a skill. Sometimes you could cry and be like, why am I crying? And you cry for a purpose. You just gotta let it flow. If you by yourself, cry, baby. Cry.
But you know what also? Another thing is, some of our emotions happen from our thoughts. I don't know if you remember this, but one time where we were living, we had left the house, and we were in the car, and I had some negative thoughts. I got out the car and went back in the house. I literally saw myself in my mind tearing up the bedroom. You remember that? I flipped the whole bedroom upside down. I saw myself doing it, and instead of controlling that thought and doing the opposite, I acted out on it.
So I think this comes with a little bit of discipline. If you having a thought to do something like flip a room, hit a person, beat a person up, kill somebody.
Please don't kill me.
Yes, please don't. Maybe even kill yourself. Don't do that either. Any thought that you may have, don't immediately react to that thought. The saying goes, think before you speak. I think you should think
before you act.
Think before you act. You may have that initial thought, oh, I'm about to flip the room, but then be like, well, why am I about to flip the room? For what? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that comes with time.
Because I used to throw stuff, tear up stuff.
Why you telling on yourself?
She telling
But
herself.
I'm free.
Oh, well, yeah,
so
true,
it's okay.
True. It is.
I used to tear up stuff I paid money for.
Right.
If y'all knew how many phones this lady went
through, I done tore up so many phones, cell phones, put holes in the wall of my brand new house because I didn't know how to control my emotions.
Yes.
Now my emotions are.
You control your emotions, they don't control you.
Exactly.
Right. And another real quick thing, don't think after therapy you're gonna be this person. Man, I got this.
I am.
I mean, of course you want to be. No. Wait. Let me finish. You, of course, you want to be a person of confidence, like life, whatever. Like throw at me. I'm good. I can handle. But also remain consistent. Don't think because you won a couple times and you've been going for a year that you cool and that when something happens to you, of course you'll definitely be able to handle the situation better, deal with it better. But also still remain consistent in maintaining those coping mechanisms, going to therapy every so often just to keep that emotional balance. Because if you get too cocky in it and something happened to you, you can be right back to where you started. So definitely remain consistent in that.
And you don't have to go to therapy every week. I think I only go once a month. It's just a mental health check. if you have health insurance and you're good about your health, sometimes you go for an annual physical. You could just go for an annual therapy session. Just like, okay, the new year's about to come up. I just want to check my mental health, see how I'm doing, see where I am, and if I'm okay to go into this new year with a great outlook and perspective. You ain't got to go every week. Everybody don't need to go every week. Yeah. I think we've ran the gambit of tips.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining this episode of the
Hey Sissy podcast.
We appreciate you tuning in. And thank you to our lovely guest, Wendi Hayman.
Yes,
Again,
yes.
her book releases at the end of the month, August 31st. You can pre-order it if this episode posts before then. If not, go buy it.
Yes.
So again, it's Wendi Hayman is our lovely guest at wendihayman.com, at Wendi Hayman on all social media platforms.
Yes.
All right.
Peace.